The fall of the Ottoman Empire, the collapse of a 600-year dynasty. Constantinople, 1922. A sultan sits alone in his palace, surrounded by centuries of grandeur, waiting for a boat that will carry him into permanent exile. Outside, the empire his ancestors built over 6 centuries, an empire that once stretched from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Yemen, has been reduced to a memory. This is not just the story of how an empire fell. This is the story of how the modern Middle East was born in blood, betrayal, and the ashes of the last great Islamic caliphate. The empire that refused to die for 623 years, the Ottoman Empire, seemed immortal. It had survived the Mongol invasions, crushed the Byzantine Empire, and turned the Mediterranean into an Ottoman lake. At its peak in the 16th century under Suleiman the Magnificent, it was the superpower of its age, a cosmopolitan juggernaut where Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted under one sultan's rule. But here's what most people don't realize. The Ottoman Empire didn't fall suddenly. It died slowly, agonizingly, over more than a century, earning the nickname the Sick Man of Europe. The rot began in the late 1700s. While European powers industrialized, built railroads, and revolutionized warfare, the Ottomans clung to tradition. The once elite Janissary Corps, slave soldiers who had terrorized Europe for centuries, became a corrupt political force more interested in palace intrigue than military discipline. When Sultan Mahmud II finally abolished them in 1826, he had to massacre them in their barracks. The empire was literally killing its own past to survive. The Tanzimat, too little, too late. The 19th century brought desperate reforms called the Tanzimat, meaning reorganization. Ottoman sultans tried to modernize everything: the military, the legal system, education, even the concept of citizenship itself. For the first time, non-Muslims were granted equal rights on paper. But here's the cruel irony. These reforms accelerated the empire's demise. Why? Because nationalism was spreading like wildfire. The Greeks revolted in 1821 and won their independence. The Serbs, Bulgarians, and Romanians followed. Each Christian population that gained freedom from Ottoman rule inspired others. The empire wasn't just shrinking geographically, it was hemorrhaging its identity. The multi-ethnic, multi-religious patchwork that had been its strength became its fatal weakness in an age of ethnic nationalism. The Young Turks, revolution from within. Enter the Young Turks, the revolutionary group that would seal the empire's fate while trying to save it. In 1908, these reformist officers forced Sultan Abdul Hamid II to restore the constitution he'd suspended 30 years earlier. They promised democracy, equality, and modernization. They delivered authoritarianism, ethnic cleansing, and catastrophic military decisions. Here's where the story gets dark. The Young Turks, desperate to create a homogeneous Turkish nation-state, began systematically eliminating minority populations. The Armenian genocide of 1915-1917 killed an estimated 1.5 million Armenians. Greeks and Assyrians faced similar campaigns of deportation and massacre. The empire that had once prided itself on managing diversity was now destroying it in the name of survival. The fateful alliance. But the decision that truly doomed the Ottomans came in 1914. They joined World War I on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary. Why would a declining empire enter the war that would define the 20th century? The answer reveals the tragic desperation of Ottoman leadership. They feared Russian expansion more than anything else, and Germany promised protection. It was a gamble that lost everything. The war was a disaster on every front. The Gallipoli campaign of 1915-1916 became the empire's last military victory, a Pyrrhic one at that. While Mustafa Kemal, later Ataturk, led Ottoman forces to victory against the British and French, elsewhere the empire was crumbling. The British stirred up Arab revolt with the help of T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, promising the Arabs their own kingdoms if they rebelled against their Turkish overlords. The secret that divided the Middle East. While promising independence to the Arabs, Britain and France were secretly dividing Ottoman territories between themselves. The Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, one of history's most consequential secret deals, literally drew lines on a map that would become the borders of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. These artificial boundaries ignored centuries of ethnic, religious, and tribal realities. We're still living with the consequences today. Then came the Balfour Declaration of 1917, in which Britain promised a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, then part of the Ottoman Empire. 3 different promises, to the Arabs, to the French, and to the Zionists, for the same land. The British were playing a geopolitical shell game and the Ottomans were the mark. The death blow. By 1918, the war was over and the Ottoman Empire was on its knees. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 was meant to be its death certificate. Allied powers planned to carve up Anatolia itself, the Turkish heartland, giving pieces to Greece, Armenia, France, and Italy. Istanbul would be internationalized. The Ottomans would be left with almost nothing. But here's where one man changed everything. Mustafa Kemal, the hero of Gallipoli, refused to accept defeat. He rallied Turkish nationalists, fought a brutal war of independence against Greek forces, and negotiated a new treaty, the Treaty of Lausanne, in 1923, that secured the borders of modern Turkey. But in doing so, he killed the Ottoman dream forever. The last Sultan. On November 1, 1922, the Grand National Assembly in Ankara voted to abolish the Sultanate. Sultan Mehmed VI, the 36th and final Sultan of the Ottoman dynasty, fled Constantinople aboard a British warship disguised to avoid recognition. Imagine the symbolism, the ruler of an empire that once besieged Vienna now sneaking away in the night like a common fugitive. He died in exile in Italy in 1926, a forgotten monarch from a forgotten age. The caliphate, the religious authority that had given the Ottomans legitimacy as leaders of the Islamic world, lasted 2 more years. In 1924, Kemal abolished it entirely, sending the last caliph into exile and declaring Turkey a secular republic. 6 centuries of Islamic imperial rule ended not with a holy war, but with a bureaucratic decree. The aftermath, a century of consequences. The fall of the Ottoman Empire wasn't just the end of a dynasty. It was the big bang of modern Middle Eastern politics. Every conflict we see today, the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, Kurdish nationalism, Syrian civil war, sectarian tensions in Iraq, has roots in the decisions made during the empire's collapse. The Ottomans had managed to keep dozens of ethnic and religious groups coexisting for centuries through a system that granted autonomy while maintaining central authority. When that system shattered, it left a power vacuum and a patchwork of artificial states that have struggled with legitimacy ever since. So when you see news from the Middle East, remember, you're watching the final act of a play that began with the Ottoman collapse. The sick man of Europe died a century ago, but his ghost still haunts 3 continents, reminding us that empires don't just fall, they explode, sending shrapnel into the future for generations to come.